Hi, welcome back to this channel. Happy New Year. This is our first episode of the year. And if you're new here, my name is Susan Silantoi. As you know, the aim of this channel is to offer information about how government works so that we just understand the role that we can play in improving the governance in our country, and through this we can create a politically empowered generation. So please like, subscribe. This is That So with Silantoi, and please share if you find this information useful as well. Alright, so today's episode we are going to talk about the political parties bill of 2021, the political parties amendment bill of 2021. Well, it's currently signed into law. The president signed that bill last week. So we're gonna just talk about three key things that you need to know about this bill. And then we'll talk about what is the point of contention. Mbona watu walikuwa na fight parliament last year in like December. So hopefully we can just understand what does this bill contain and what is the whole situation that was going on over there. We're gonna just talk about three key points of what you need to know about this bill. So the first one is the bill changes the definition of a political party and allows for the formation of something we call a coalition party. So we discussed this in a previous episode, the episode about political parties, just what are political parties, what is that whole situation, and I'll link that episode in the description below. So really, a political party is just a group of people who seek to capture political power, and therefore this bill actually proposes to have a group of parties be recognized as one party in what they call a coalition party. Okay, I'll give you an example. So in the last election, we had the NASA coalition, which was in the 2017 election, and the presidential candidate for that coalition was Raila Odinga, but Raila was actually vying in ODM party, so that's his party. If that bill was in place at that time, then Raila could have vied under the NASA coalition party. So really what that bill does is just it allows for that coalition to be recognized as one party. Do you guys remember who the NASA principals were and what parties they were in? If you remember that, please put it in the comments and let's see how many of us remember that. So really the bill just changes how we define a political party, and it allows for the formation of a coalition party so that a group of parties can come together and form one big party. And even as they form that big party, they can have their own identities remain. So you can still be part of this party as, for example, like NASA coalition party, but you can still have your individual parties remain intact with their own individual identities. All right, so that's point number one. Number two is that this bill actually puts into law how to form a pre-election coalition and how to engage within that coalition. So we've always had coalitions before. The coalitions are not something new. So I mentioned in the previous point that we had the NASA coalition in 2017. If we go further back, we had the COD coalition in 2013. If we go even further back, in 2002, we had the NAC coalition that brought the President Kibaki into power in 2002. So coalitions are not new, and they've always existed, and there's always been a way to engage with these coalitions. So what used to happen is that these coalitions would sign something they call the memorandums of understanding, MOUs. So these MOUs would actually outline how these parties would engage within these coalitions, and once they sign these MOUs, they file it with the registrar of political parties, so that it's recognized that this is the agreement that we have within these parties. But then what would happen is that a lot of times these agreements were not honored. People would go against these agreements within these parties, and then therefore it would mean that people clash, like they would disagree. What wanakosana because now the agreements are not honored, and then because it's an understanding, it's not punishable by law. Like there's nothing that can be done if you don't follow these understandings, and so that became a problem. And so what this bill does is that it actually puts into place into law how these parties would engage, so that if these agreements are not honored, it's actually punishable by the law. So that's something that this bill is proposing, having into place these agreements as law, so that even as you get into these agreements before the elections, if after the elections these agreements are not followed, then it's punishable. The other thing is, this bill also puts into place the ways of doing nominations. It puts into law ways of doing nominations within these parties, so you can have either direct or indirect nominations. All right, so the other thing is that this bill also sets timelines for when these coalitions are formed, and specifically it says that these coalitions should be formed at least latest 4 months to the general election. So that means if the election is in August, we should have these coalitions in place by April. So yeah, do you think these agreements would be followed because they are now law? Do you think that this sorts out the issue of memorandums of understandings not being followed within these coalitions? Do you think this will help this problem? So that's the second point, that this bill puts into law how to form these pre-election coalitions and how they engage. So it puts it in the law. Initially it wasn't in the law, but now it puts it into the law. Okay, so now to the last point, this bill sets out a formula on revenue sharing within these political parties. So by the way, political parties are actually funded by the national government, and the amount of funding that they get is actually determined by the number of people who are elected within these parties. So obviously, if you have more people elected within your party, then you get more funding. Now, you would wonder, okay, so why does this have to specify how much people get? And this is because, you see, within those coalitions, you'd obviously find one party probably has more elected people than another. And therefore, this would mean that the party with more elected people gets more funding than the party with the less number of people, even within that coalition. And so this has always been a point of conflict, because I guess people would feel, oh, we contributed this much, but we're not getting enough and all that. So it always became a point of conflict. And so now this bill seeks to fix that problem, so that even as you get into that pre-election coalition, you know how much funding you're going to get within that framework, so that isikwe a point of isikwe an issue later on. Did you know, by the way, that parties are funded by the national government? Tell me in the comments if you knew this, and what do you think this money is usually used for? Let me know in the comments below. So we've talked about 3 main points. The first one is that the bill changes the definition of a political party, and it allows for the formation of a coalition party. The second point is that the bill puts into law how pre-election coalitions are formed. How pre-election coalitions are formed and how they engage with each other. That's the second point. And then the last point is that the bill actually sets out a formula on how to share the political parties' funding between the different parties within that coalition. Okay. So we've talked about what this bill is about, and I'm sure you're wondering, kwani, what's the big deal about this? And I'll give you some context. So we know that there are 2 main frontrunners for the presidential election, and that's Deputy President William Ruto and Raila Odinga as well, the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. And initially, this bill was actually perceived to favor Raila Odinga, and this is because he talked about wanting to form a coalition as we head to the election under his Azimio la Umoja movement, which he launched in December while he was announcing his candidature. At the same time, the Deputy President William Ruto had stated that he was not interested in forming coalitions, and he set up his political party UDA, United Democratic Alliance. And he said he wants a national party, and he will vie under the UDA ticket. So he said he's not interested in having a coalition. So people said that the political parties bill would favor Raila because it would help him negotiate his way with other parties in order to form probably a coalition party called Azimio la Umoja, and he would vie under that ticket. So we know initially that Raila Odinga has been in other coalitions. He was in the NASA coalition in 2017. He was in the CORD coalition in 2013. And like other parties that were members of these coalitions have come out to say that they were aggrieved within these agreements, that maybe the agreements were not followed, probably there are things that they had agreed on and it didn't come through, and so they felt like aggrieved members of this coalition. And it was thought that if we put this coalition story into a law through this political parties bill, then it would make the agreements clearer, and probably people will be able to stick to those agreements. And so it would help actually Raila negotiate these agreements right now while we head to the elections. And that's why it seemed like it would favor him over Ruto, because Ruto just wanted a national party and he seemed like he wasn't interested in having a coalition. So that was a big deal then, and that's why members of parliament who are allied to Deputy President Ruto were actually against the bill in parliament, and they voted against it. And then that whole scenario of the fight came up because it was thought that the bill would favor Raila. So interestingly enough, Ruto has now come out to say that he's open to coalitions. And so if indeed, and now that the bill has been signed into law, if indeed this was supposed to benefit people to be able to form coalitions, then it looks like it's going to favor both of them, because if both of them are interested in having these coalitions, then I guess both of them would be able to go through with it. So initially it was a big deal just because of the stance of both these presidential candidates, with Raila wanting a coalition and Ruto not wanting a coalition. But now that both of them are open to having coalitions, then I guess this stops being a big deal. So yeah, that's really what the fight was about, because one person wants a coalition and the other one doesn't, and it seemed like the person who was going to have the coalition was going to be if the bill went through, was going to have an upper hand in the elections. So now it's fair game now for everybody. But really, fundamentally, there's really nothing wrong with the bill, and it doesn't really change much. We've always had coalitions, they've always existed, people have always had agreements. The only difference is now with the bill with the law in place, then this agreements will actually be anchored in the law. That's really the only difference. Fundamentally, there's nothing wrong, and we've always had this bills. We've always had these coalitions anyway. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are about this. I'd really love to hear what you think. Do you still think having this law in place gives either of the two candidates an upper hand? Some people have also said that maybe it will kill off smaller parties. Some people think it won't. Some people say that having this in place, especially the issue about funding, will probably have many more smaller parties coming up trying to join coalitions, so that they have more revenue. There's a lot of conversation about what this does to democracy. These are all different opinions, and I'd really love to hear from you. What do you think this bill will do to our electoral system? Is it going to make it better? Is it going to make it worse? Does it give any candidate an upper hand? Does it not? In my personal opinion, I don't think it does. But I'd really love to hear your thoughts about this. And then again, I ask, do you really think that having this bill in place, having this law in place, will make sure that coalition agreements are followed because it's anchored in law, because it could be punishable by law? Do you think so? Ama you think bado watarukana kama venye wamekuwa wakirukana in those other years? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. But yeah, that's really what it was about. This is why people were fighting. Imagine. Yeah. But anyway, this has been our episode. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Please give it a like. Please share it with a friend. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.